Okay, welcome back. We'll just start with who we have here. My name is Robin McCanns, and I am on staff with the Southeast Michigan Synod. And part of my portfolio includes all of these justice ministries. So I am glad that you all took the time to be here today and to learn something new. I think all of us are learning some new things. And before we move on to our panel discussion, I really wanted to introduce to you the chairs of our different justice ministries in case there is interest in becoming a part of these groups. So from the Immigration Task Force, we have Jessica Beamer. She's over there. Hi, Jessica. From our Hunger Task Force is Pastor Sarah Freudenberg, who's over here, and she co-chairs with Pastor Anna Taylor McCants, who's in the kitchen because her ministry fed us today, amen? With our BRIC team, Building Racial Reconciliation in Christ's Kingdom, we would have had Pastor Mike Johnson, who was the chair, but his stand-in and presenter today is Reverend Lindsay Anderson. And from the Diversity Task Force is Miss Wendy Wellman, who's there. And the session that we had on ableism was led by Pastor Sarah Meyer-Flatt, who's also a panelist today. So thank you all for all of the coordination. It was a lot of work getting to this day, and we thank you for doing so. So again, welcome. And I just wanted to say a little bit about this panel as the team that was pulling together what a panel would look like. I was kind of in charge of contacting people. And these are the people who said yes, by the way. But the joy of this group of people is some real commonalities. Faith, of course, is very strong with all of the folks here. But they're also all involved in the arts and in culture to a huge degree. So I think it's by divine order that we are all at this place. And, oh, I forgot to get the okay to start recording. Okay. I'm sorry. So we've worshiped this morning, and we will again this afternoon. You've had some intentional time in your workshops, and I hope that you all feel not so much as overwhelmed, but that you feel equipped and informed and prepared and stretched and maybe angered a little bit, hurt, and possibly provoked and stirred so that you want to know more and learn more. And in order for you to do so, keep doing things like this. Proverbs 21:15 says, when justice is done, it is a joy to the righteous and a dismay to the evildoers. So let's keep on dismaying the evildoers and keep on being joyful about this work. Now, this work can be overwhelming. I think I learned this term a long time ago from Pastor Lindsay, justice fatigue. It's hard sometimes to keep doing this. So sometimes we do have to pick and choose. But how do you decide which areas fit in a way that allows you to stand strong and continue to do the work? Well, this group of panelists are here to kind of tell their story around that and how they manage and make a difference in the midst of all of the intersections of justice work. Do you choose this? Do you choose that? Who do you bring to the table? Who has the wisdom? How do you listen? How do you develop and nurture partnerships? So with that, I'm going to stop speaking, but I want to introduce our panelists first. We have I'll start here. Pastor Sarah Meyer-Flatt is one of our Synod storytellers and a pastor in our Synod. And J.M., oh boy, triplet, is invited from Salem United Church of Christ. And then Miss Gwen Winston from the Wisdom Institute, And Bill, I'm gonna try real hard. Bill Miskokomon. Amen. From the Southeast Michigan Indians Incorporated, and then Mr. DeJuan Bland from Moses. Give them a round of applause. I'm just going to step over to the side so that you have full view of our panelists. We can just start in whichever order you like with an introduction again of yourself and the organization that you are here representing.
I seen heads turn this way, so I'm guessing we're starting this way. DeJuan Bland, lead organizer with Moses, also a minister at Faith Redemption Center in the city of Detroit. Moses does faith-based organizing and has been organizing in the southeast region of Michigan since about 1997. Well, it was before then, but 3 different organizations came together to form Moses. The name used to be Wadifco, and then people stopped trying to figure out what that meant. Then it was going to be Gamaliel of Detroit, but then people were like, we can't name our organization God. So Moses it was. So we built leadership teams or trained leadership teams within congregations to be able to work on both the values and the issues, both internal to the congregation and the community around them. This year we have, as well as citywide, countywide, statewide issues. This year we have 4 priority issues or pillars for the organization. That is environmental justice and jobs, criminal justice reform, health equity, and then inclusive democracy. And yeah, I've been organizing with Moses for 8 years.
Hello, I'm Bill Miskokomon. I'm with King of Kings Lutheran Church out of Shelby Township, and also Southeastern Michigan Indians. I sit on the council there. Been with Southeastern Michigan Indians for approximately 40 years. When I started as a little kid, it's been ingrained in me to serve that community. I attended a Native American school out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I definitely got a big eye opener when I was out there. There's a lot of, there was the red man's drinking fountain, the white man's drinking fountain. That was back in the 80s. So coming from Detroit, it opened my eyes to see, hey, there's a big problem here, and we need to come together. And coming from Detroit and coming from a mixed family, it was a little tough. It was challenging trying to put the pieces together. Also, for Southeastern Michigan Indians, I taught building trades for Van Dyke Public Schools, and I had students coming in from different reservations. They would travel from Canada and the United States within Michigan to take the building trades class. So we took an old building and we converted it into the center. That's the only way we could afford to build the center, is with the labor from the students, and also teaching them a trade. Also, there was a problem several years back with K2 and synthetic drugs, and so I had a son that was impacted by that, and so I led the charge, and there was other families that were impacted, so I led a charge to get that banned in the state of Michigan. So also vaping, I worked with a lot of municipalities to establish local ordinances to establish an age limit for vaping until the state could get caught up with the problem we were having with vaping with the youth, and then also the hookah lounges in our community and other communities where they were just letting kids come in and help themselves, and there was no regulation for the hookah lounges, so tried to get my arms around that as well. So it takes a lot of us working together to make that happen. So that's a little bit about myself.
Now he's looking at me, voluntold, you're next. I am Gwendolyn Winston. I am the Executive Director of the Wisdom Institute, and I have cards on the table. The Wisdom Institute is an African-American woman and girl-centered nonprofit. We were founded in the 90s on a college campus by first-generation women college students as a self-help group, and we grew. And they put us off campus because we grew loud too, and so we found other people to sponsor and support us. Our mission is to help lift the determination of women and girls to further advance the quality of our lives, our livelihood, and leadership. And you'll see we work, talk about intersectionality. We center on healing justice, water affordability plan for the city of Detroit, and it's grown. Our presence is now statewide, so we're working on statewide water affordability. We work on Detroit passed a right to counsel law to ensure that those who are being evicted would have an attorney in court. The law was passed on May 1st, 2022. It was supposed to take effect October 22. And this is what, March 25th, 2023, and it ain't happened yet. We also center on reproductive justice, and reproductive justice is the full spectrum. We move beyond abortion. It's a full spectrum of reproductive health. And we teach the art of listening. I have been engaged in community all of my life, growing up in the Black Baptist Church. Then I worked for United Church of Christ in the civil rights, vicariously in the civil rights movement. I was the secretary, so I got to sit in all the meetings and take the notes. And when I got into political activism, I learned that the person who takes the notes controls the meeting. So I was really, really in good space. And then I moved into nonprofit work where I met Robin. And as a consultant facilitator, I facilitate small and large group decision-making using the practice of dialogue.
Well, I guess that's me now. Such an august body. Hello, everyone. I'm Reverend J.M. Triplett III, and my pronouns are they, them. I'm passionate about creating innovative and inclusive faith-based organizations and worship spaces. So currently, I am the Congregational Outreach Coordinator for Inclusive Justice of Michigan in partnership with Michigan Unitarian Universalist Social Justice Network. And these organizations work towards creating a more equitable and just world for all, of course. Our mission is to empower and engage the communities of faith to become more involved in social justice issues. I'm also the Minister of Innovation and Technology here in Farmington, Michigan at Salem United Church of Christ, where I strive to create meaningful and inspiring experiences for our congregation. Both the Inclusive Justice of Michigan and Salem United Church of Christ share a common goal of promoting love, acceptance, and inclusion in our committees, in our communities. I am excited to be here today and to share my experiences and insights on the intersections of faith, social justice, and innovation. If anyone is interested in learning more about my organizations and workshop opportunities, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you for having me.
I guess I'm left. My name is Pastor Sarah Mayer Flatt. I am a pastor here in the Southeast Michigan Synod, and I am on contract with Synod staff as the Synod storyteller. That role allows me to share insights, particularly around disability issues, but also to tell the stories of congregations and ministries throughout our Synod. And so I have learned a lot and have probably the rest of my year mapped out if I could go home and do it quickly in terms of what stories to tell. I became passionate with disability justice within the last number of years. I've done a lot of disability inclusion work in my life, but the way that disability justice is defined is through really intentionally working towards the intersectionality of disability and other oppressive or least of these type identities that individuals have. And so it's kind of promoting the idea that all of us are, if we're not disabled, we're temporarily able-bodied. And disability often makes people uncomfortable because it's a reflection of what could and probably will happen to many people at some point in their life. So my role is kind of shifting and still forming in that, which is really exciting. It's an exciting place to be.
Right, thank you. Thank you, panelists. So the first question is, how have you engaged the partnerships and relationships that are essential for what you do? And what kind of partnerships are important for your work in your community? It's kind of I kind of joined those two together. And so basically just let's talk about the partnerships that you have found to become important as you do the work that you do and how that happened.
Well, you know, there was a time when we said we wanted allies. We don't want allies anymore. We want accomplices. So we look for accomplices, those who are willing, who willingly, who understand, who are interested in understanding that we center unapologetically on the lives of African American women, being safe and thriving no matter where, no matter what. And we also say we have no need to decenter anyone in order to center ourselves. You know, because the word that comes up always, African American, do you include? Well, what about Latin American women? And what about well, we say African American women have been murdered, denigrated, our bodies not belonging to us since we crossed over the Atlantic. And so we want to spend all our time healing. And if you don't want to go there, that's okay. That's just not your space. And we are spirit-centered. And how we talk to one another matters. And we are artists. And we don't all agree. And that's okay. And the other important thing is, we don't know where we're going. So you got to be comfortable in going through the I don't know.
I would say some other items for partnership, like King of Kings, we co-sponsored a wild game dinner with Southeastern Michigan Indians. And building the trust, before you go in and you think you're going to solve somebody's problem, you got to understand what their problems are. And you got to listen to them, listen to the elders. You just can't go in. I know we all want to go in and we want to try to fix things, but sometimes you put people off by going in there and you're going to take control. It's their house. We got to sit back. We got to listen. We got to understand. And then we got to try to figure out together how are we going to solve this problem. So just coming in and saying, hey, I went to this class, or I did this, or I did that, you're not going to be able to just walk into somebody's house and say, I'm going to take control and help solve all your problems, because a wall will go up and then nothing gets done. So we partner with Mopar. Mopar has their employees come down and they spruce up the building. So we build this trust with the Mopar employees. So they come in, they help spruce up the building as needed. And then they also do an annual coat drive, food drive. And so they're constantly helping our community. And so now there's a trust, and that goes a long ways. I'd also say volunteer in one of the nonprofits and understand exactly what they're impacting. Sometimes when you're boots on the ground, you get a better feel for what's really happening. Instead of going in there with a suit and tie on or thinking that, once again, we're going to solve their problems. It's not going to happen that easy. Then I would say volunteer and attend powwows. In the Native American community, there's powwows, and it's open to the general public. Matter of fact, there's one going on this weekend at the Skyline School in Ann Arbor. So there's a powwow going there. There's support the Native American businesses. And as I talk about the Native American and some of the issues that we're facing, I'm talking about what I have experienced with Southeastern Michigan Indians, and then back on my own reservation, Walpole Island. I cannot speak for Mount Pleasant. I cannot speak for Sault Ste. Marie, because they're their own nation. So we're a nation within a nation. And when I went to school in Albuquerque, I realized that somebody from the Navajo reservation or somebody from reservation North Carolina, they all have different problems, but we're all alike. So it's just, we have to peel back that onion and work slowly to rebuild it.
I would love to piggyback off that. Thank you so much for that. Because for me, in order to create inclusive spaces, I believe we need to suspend our judgment about anything. It is very difficult for an outside person to come in a system and believe that they can change that system without first understanding that system. Some of the things that you may believe is an injustice is just a reaction of something that may have happened in their lives that they are looking to get it solved. And if we answer the underlying issue, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, some of these other things that are ancillary, they will come into place. So really just having a conversation with whomever you believe that you think you're called to help, and be willing to be uncomfortable in that room and be willing to be wrong about many assumptions and many things you've studied. Because one of the things I've realized, because I'm a science person, right? I'm a nerd. For hundreds of years, we thought the universe looked like one thing. And then within the last decade, we realized that 18.7 billion years can be seen through a black hole, which we've never seen through before. What that says for me is that facts aren't facts. We don't know everything, and experience teaches us a lot of things that we may not even be able to articulate. But if I can hang out with you long enough, I can figure out some things that can help us both.
Yeah, so I just want to echo that. I think this work has to be relational, or it isn't going to go anywhere. I think one of the uncomfortable truths, but the truth is, in any organizing space, and I'm sure the rest of the panel can attest to this, you are messing with people's lives. You don't just confront power and institutions and prejudices without there being consequences. You see it in the scriptures, right? When God gave a lot of the prophets this thing, there was this immediate acknowledgement of the burden that came along with it. And that's why I love Ephesians when it says submit yourself one to another. That word submit could be translated to sharing a burden. So that's why I think the work has to be relational. So for us, when we're building leadership teams in the congregation, it isn't just knowing the pastors, knowing every single person that we are going to be working with, and even the folks who aren't a part of that leadership team. Like the congregant should know who I am when I show up. And then external to the organizations, we also deeply believe in building deep relationships with other organizations that share space with us, right? So just recently we took on DTE. They wanted more money for us. I don't think anybody in the room wanted to pay DTE any more money than you're already paying for them. And so we partnered with people like Michigan United and Detroit Action and Mother Injustice, because we understood, just us by ourselves, we don't have enough power individually to take on DTE. But if we have some other folks who are very committed to this work be with us, then we should do it. So it has to be deeply relational. And then I'll just end on this. Being an organization that does faith-based organizing and being a minister myself, I very much look at this as a vocation and a ministry. And so people should definitely understand, like, where does that sense of purpose come from in this work? Because if you're not connected to a purpose in the work, I don't think it's going to last. It's easier things to do.
Just to piggyback off of what everybody has said, disability justice has to be relational, because accessibility is something that requires at least two people, right? There needs to be an accessible space for someone to enter, but then companionship along the way as well. The disability justice movement began as recently as 2005, which means that's younger than I'm imagining some of the organizations that my co-panelists are involved in or have been involved in. And so that, again, is creating, giving opportunity for us to create really intentional and exciting relationships with not only congregations in the Southeast Michigan Synod, but other organizations that are doing faith-based relational justice work. And so we're kind of in the process of figuring all of that out here at the Synod. And so I don't want to overwhelm myself by saying, get in touch with me if this is something that you're passionate about, but I will probably be around for a little while and will absolutely take information from folks if that's something that is up your alley.
So building relationships, listening, and being willing to be uncomfortable helps build community. What are your thoughts on, so let me back up. We have folks who have been involved in workshops and hearings. Some people have heard things for the first time. And as we heard at lunchtime, JM, it can be, it's like, where do I start? How do I get involved? Because I've never done this before. So what are your thoughts on how our congregations, how folks here on the ground can start to show up in partnerships at the very grassroots level of where they are in their congregations and then beyond?
I feel like you said my name, so I'm just gonna.
JM.
Well, you know, my colleagues have said relationships. So just talking. Everyone who's in the room today is doing something, and that's the first step. You have to realize that it doesn't take you moving a mountain. It takes you having a conversation with someone who's different than you, and a conversation with someone who's the same as you, and inviting new language into that new conversation, because it's easier. Scripture says in Proverbs that a walled city is easier to enter into than an offended kindred. So it is easier for someone who has relationship, again, the relationship, to talk with someone else. And if, for instance, if I'm able-bodied or I appear able-bodied, it would be easier for me to have a conversation and then bring my colleague or my friend or my partner along as this is an individual you need to talk to. I don't have the answers because I don't represent that way, but I can get you to some people who can have a good conversation with you. And just understanding that you don't need to know it all. You actually don't need to know anything. You just need to be willing to learn.
Yeah, so we're actually in a series of trainings that kind of get at this question of what congregations, you know, the pathway to entry. And so, of course, it all has to be relational. And so one of the first things that we do besides a series of one-to-ones is train congregations on how to do both an in-reach and an outreach. And the in-reach is, you know, this team of people in the congregation actually doing one-to-ones with the members of the congregation, hearing people's stories, what's their values, what's the day-to-day issues that they face, and understand what's happening in this building. You know, a lot of times it's just like, you know, we want to get into some worthwhile fights, but it's like, is this a fight that actually concerns you, or that is within your self-interest? I think it is stuff like that that keeps people into the fight, that the fight that they're in is connected to their own story. We did an in-reach in my congregation a few years back, and a lot of folks have been going to the church for over a decade, and as they were hearing each other's story, they came to this realization: oh, I didn't know anything about the people that I've been worshiping with. And everybody had similar concerns, so we organized around the concerns. The second part is the outreach. So once it's good to know everybody in the building, but these buildings aren't just surrounded by woods and gravel, right? There's actual communities and people who have day-to-day struggles around our congregations, and a lot of times the struggles aren't dissimilar to the people who are in the building, and so we need to go have conversations with them and then try to, you know, work on something together. A very concrete example: around my church, there were a lot of abandoned buildings and homes, and nobody liked them. They were eyesight in the community. They were just unsafe for the kids around, and the city wouldn't release the funds to demo these houses because there was no plans for economic development around the congregation. So we started talking to people inside the church. It's like, we really hate these abandoned houses. We started talking to the community members. They really hated those abandoned houses. So we organized some meetings with city council and got into some good fights, right, to get these houses knocked down. But it started with people just hearing each other's stories.
Accessibility starts with attitude, not with a ramp. As individuals and congregations, you have to be willing to engage. 67% of people in our country are uncomfortable talking to people with disabilities. So that's kind of the first step, is being able to educate yourself, being able to engage in conversation and be wrong about the language you use, and be willing to be corrected, and to know that, and to believe that person's story as they present it, right? So it doesn't matter if you don't think they're disabled enough or if you think they're too disabled. That is their story and they own that. Disability justice focuses a lot on individual agency and ownership of that, which is why we talked a little bit about in the workshop that we're moving towards really identity first language instead of person first language. And that is true, I think, within the church as well.
What I recommend is that you listen to your head and your heart. You have power and spirit within, and spirit talks to you. You don't listen. Listen and do with courage. You may still have fear. Be courageous. At the Wisdom Institute, we train in the art of listening. And so when you, and what we've discovered, and we just started, we switched up some, but we listen and we don't tell people what to do. What we do, what our role is to mirror what they said. We are usually expect that people won't be listening. And it's such a surprise when we paraphrase what they've said and they say, oh, is that what I said? And that builds trust. It builds, like you all have said, relationship. So we are intent, we've trained about 20 African American women in the art of listening, and we practice. You must practice. To be a master, you must practice. And so we practice the art of listening, and we infuse our way of being in any area where we are. And we talk about the words that we say to one another impacts how we work together. We say in public that we love one another, and we say that's revolutionary. We are creating now, because we're womb-centered, a womanist lexicon. So we have fun. We make up words that we can say at tables where there's this huge masculinity of describing everything. And we're working on how do we talk about our wombs in public like it's a business prospect, you know? So be imaginative. Be wrong. It's okay. It's all right.
There are a number of things that need to be dismantled in order for the church to effectively partner with Native Americans in a way that is truly useful. One of the main obstacles is the lack of understanding and empathy for the unique history and experience of various Native American communities. As I said earlier, every community is a little different. Some have their different languages, they have their own tribal courts, they have their elders that they respect, and they have just different beliefs. The church must also take the time to listen, learn about the struggles and triumphs of all Native Americans, and recognize the ways in which colonization and systemic oppression have impacted their lives. Another obstacle is the lack of trust and mistrust between Native Americans and the church. As you guys have probably read or seen on TV, all the things going on with the Native American communities and the churches. And it's going to take a little while to rebuild that and build that trust. The church must also make an effort to build relationships based on respect, honesty, and transparency. This includes acknowledging the harm that has been done in the past and committing to actively work towards reconciliation and healing. Lastly, the church must be willing to prioritize the needs and concerns of Native American communities rather than impose their own agendas and priorities. This means being willing to step back, as everybody on the panel here is saying, and listen, taking direction from the Native American leaders, which is our elders, and the community, and actively working to address the issues that matter most to them. Overall, the key to an effective partnership with the Native American community is to build relationships based on mutual respect, understanding, trust, and prioritize the needs of the Native American community above all else. There are many ways that the church can engage in a helpful manner to assist Native Americans in their communities. Some suggestions include hosting community events that celebrate and honor Native American cultures, and the tradition such as Native American Month in November. I don't know how many people knew that there is Native American Month in November, and in Indigenous Peoples Day, which is in October. Ironically, it's on Columbus Day. Donating necessary items. Our nonprofit, we serve Native Americans that move off the reservation. Everybody thinks every Native American's rich and we all have casinos and we sell tobacco and we're all alcoholics and you give us fire water and we go crazy. That's far from the truth. We do have a lot of struggles because in our community, you cannot just go get a loan like you can here because they have no way to go and retrieve that asset in the event that it was a default. So not all Native Americans are rich. We don't own casinos. I don't have a tobacco factory where I'm selling cigarettes. I do pay my fair share of taxes. So I would just say, once again, it's listening, understanding, figuring out what struggles the Native American community has.
So wherever you worship, it doesn't matter if it's in the city, the suburb, or in a rural area, there are organizations, there are groups of people who gather wherever you are. And we have the tendency to invite people in, and if they don't conform to our ways, we find a way to invite them out. So what are your thoughts on things that church people need to do that needs to be dismantled when it comes to working with other groups, whether those groups are invited into our buildings or into our spaces or outside of our spaces? How can us church people engage in a way that is truly useful?
So I'll just list one of them to not take up the whole list. But there's a false humility and kumbaya spirit in the church that keep us from confrontation. All right, we talk about peace and love and all of these things, which are in the scripture, right? God teaches us that, right? We teach heavily about humility, even though power is taught more in the scripture than to be humble is. And the church is very non-confrontational in meaningful ways. Myself, I'm a boxer, and I really want to be in Creed 4, so if anybody can email Michael B. Jordan. I don't want to fight Michael B. Jordan. We're not the same weight, but I'm a very non-confrontational person, but inside the boxing ring, I know there's a necessary confrontation for at least 3 minutes, or else there will be some sort of harm that's coming my way. Now, the difference between society and me in a ring, I can choose to get inside those ropes. In our community, in our society, the harm will come whether or not we choose to be a part of it or not. And we just got to go beyond prayer and wanting peace. We have to get into necessary confrontation so that we can live in peace.
Scripture says, "Come, let us reason together." I loved what my colleague talked about, confrontation, and even that boxing analogy. I've never boxed in my life.
Me either.
I've fought, but but I've kind of co-opted that boxing analogy because on the flip side, it is also about staying in the ring. It is about being able to be in that ring and understanding what licks to take and what to say, right? So it's that back and forth. It's that willing, again, as he said, to get into the ring and to have that conversation. That takes the courage. Martin Luther King Jr., I think he said it, and some other people said, do it when your voice shakes, do it when your hand shake. And I can, from personal attestment, every time I do something, I shake. People say, oh, you've been singing, you've been preaching all your life, and I'm still afraid. There are still many things that come against me in a moment. And so your fear is real, and I understand the fear of not knowing. I understand the fear of expectations and all. But to be able to have that conversation is the first step. Just get in the ring. Just ask somebody about something, and then realize that we're all a work in progress.
At the Wisdom Institute, we recognize and encourage the fact of the matter that we are decolonizing. We don't know what that looks like. It shows up in so many ways. But understand, if you don't know what decolonizing is, study. So when it shows up, you're not the one who's saying, what's wrong with them people? We have African American women that I work with. We have this deep historical pain and trauma, and boy, girl, it shows up in ways that we don't know what to do about it. But your heart speaks to you. And we promote love. That's what all the church is supposed to be about, love. And that's why I love to work inside of faith-based organizing, because I can go there. Don't you love me? I thought that's what this was all about. So I'm checking you and calling you in to love. That is so powerful. Not only calling you into love, but all that we're doing, we're calling you into this arena of healing justice. And y'all, churches know about healing. So get with us. Keep that as a focus. You're there to move healing, move justice through the eyes of healing and love, and show up in that way. Thank you.
I think one issue that many congregations and churches need to kind of get over is the idea that we have to be perfect, or we have to appear like we are doing our best selves and working our butts off to keep up with our neighbors and our friends and our family members. And that somehow equates to being better in our faith. And the reality is our God is a disabled God. God resurrected, Jesus resurrected, still had the wounds in his hands and in his side. And because of that, we can trust that all people, including those with disabilities, are image bearers of God. And that truth needs to be internalized and not just sort of recognized only on the Sundays when we have healing texts as our primary gospel text.
So there's a lot here, right? I mean, we're hearing some words that we don't normally hear in our worship services on Sunday. Maybe you should go on Wednesday or on Tuesday, because there is a lot. You know, we're talking about intersections and decolonizing, and words that in some spaces would be like cuss words. But it's okay in a space like this because you want to learn what these things mean. Any word here that you have not, any word that you've heard that you don't know, Google it. Google is a good tool. So our next question. In a justice landscape with so many intersections of oppression, in many places to engage in the work of resistance, how do you navigate intersectionality? How do you remain engaged in the work in sustainable ways or think about shared liberation? That's a mouthful.
I would say first you have to work collaboratively with activists and other social justice movements to ensure that Native American perspectives and priorities are included and respected. In addition, it's important to be informed about the specific issues that impact the Native American communities, such as ongoing struggle for land rights, access to health care and education, and the disproportionate impacts of the environmental issues and climate change of Native lands and communities. Environmental issues and climate change are things that can harm the earth, like pollution or natural disasters. Sorry about that. And, Native lands communities are places where some people have lived for a very long time and have a strong connection to that place. Like when they pushed the Native Americans, my family, or I trace back all the way to like in Ohio, in the Maumee area, we got pushed up into Detroit, and then in Detroit we got pushed to the water, and that's how we ended up on the island, because people did not want to live on the water. Only the peasants lived on the water, so they pushed us there. So now we have this resource, and it's a diamond in the rough. Now everybody wants that land back, so they push us there. They give us these treaties. They tell us they're going to give us all this stuff, and then they renege from it. So another thing is harmful things affect the communities more than other communities. This happens because sometimes people who live on these lands may not have as many resources to protect themselves, or they have the traditions and ways of living that are directly affected by these harmful things. By staying informed and engaged with these issues and working in solidarity with the Native Americans. Once again, as I talked earlier, we cannot get a loan to buy a house. I cannot get a loan to buy a car in the reservation. So we depend on money that's ceded to the reservation from the government. They only give so much money to each community, and then they have to split that money up amongst the community for home improvements or somebody to build their first home. So it's a lot of struggles, and we need to come together. And Native Americans are very passive people. They don't like to they don't want confrontation. They don't want to create any problems. We try to keep everything inside, and we don't know how to reach out to other people for help. And we need to break down those barriers and work together. And that's what I have.
Okay, I'll go. So I guess it's, recognizing that the same system that's created a culture that says, black men aren't safe anywhere. We've been killed in suits and hoodies and seatbelts, all of those things. The same system that produced the society that thinks that way eventually comes for everyone else. There's no identity that you can assume that will keep you safe. And a lot of the times we just don't see that we are all victims or will be victims in some way, shape, or form. And so there has to be not only this awareness of intersectionality, but this willingness to show up with and for each other. And kind of in the oppression Olympics. And I deeply believe that we gotta fight together for each other to build the community that we want to see.
So I learned a new word today. I'll share it with y'all. You don't have to pay for it. It's free. It is called universal design, right? And so when we're talking about our intersections, when I heard of universal design, it reminded me of what is most important, what is at the bottom. So universal design, let me read the definition so I don't mess it up. Universal design is the design and composition of an environment so that it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. And so that modality there, that thought process, how do we intentionally make something universal on purpose? Instead of calling people into a place and say, hey, be like me. And when you think about that modality, that creates what intersection is all about, because you begin to dig past the surface. You begin to dig past perceptions. You begin to dig past your abilities and begin to see what is the common language that underlies all of this. And it seems to be, and I don't want to put words in people's mouth, it seems to be relationship. And so the greatest rule, the golden rule as we call it, it says, love the Lord. Y'all know it, right? Y'all church folks. But it says, love your neighbor. Okay, we realize there's three rules there. Love the Lord, love your neighbor, but before you can love your neighbor, love yourself. And I think one of the biggest problems that I had, and I still have, is I don't know what love is. And so I'm placing on myself something that I think is love, and then I'm placing that same operation on someone else, and neither one of us is loved. So maybe if we want to be more like Christ, we can ask Christ what love is. And then we can just be like Christ. And the buildings that we've built and the sermons that we've created and all the beautiful things that we've done, we can repurpose it under the message of love. That I'm doing all of this and I'm changing all of this because
Getting ready for tomorrow, right?
I wish I knew scripture. Okay. I can whip out those scriptures. And I want to say that you must remember that, the Wisdom Institute has this great intersectionality, right? And we also know that we're operating inside a matrix of domination, okay? And then once we are awakened to that understanding, then it is up to us with this understanding of will and love within us to start our own deconstruction, deconstruct it. And that's our role. Not wait for someone else to tell us, this means this. Do your work. Do your internal work. Do your head work. Do your heart work. And understand and know there's a whole lot of work to be done. And there's a space for you to put your foot wherever you decide to place it. And then do it. And then do it. And then tomorrow, do it again.
And maybe bring somebody with you while you're doing it, right? Those are our, those are our questions. So let's give our panel a hand. The challenge for y'all then is to do some thinking inside and talk to some of the people that you can influence, the people in your families, the people in your congregations, the people that live next door to you, and start developing some new relationships. You may not have the contact information of the folks here on our panel, but the places that they represent are on the back of your brochure. So there's that. And we don't have time for questions, but if you have questions or you want some extended time with them, they'll be available for a few minutes while we take a break for worship. And then if something comes up on your way home or as you're at home, just send any of us that you have contact information for Pastor Mark here or me at the Synod office or any of our panelists or your pastors, and we will route you to our panelists. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here.